What if there was a console right there? For about the first half of my career, every single mix that I heard that I was like, wow, that's really, really incredible sounding. How'd they do that? And then I looked up who mixed it, and then I looked up how they mixed it, and every single time it was mixed on an SSL. I'm not talking 99% of the time. I'm talking 100% of the time. Now, I came up on consoles. My first professional studio had a console. My second professional studio had a console. I mixed live all the time on consoles. When I built my studio right downtown in Peoria, Illinois, where I'm from, and I was planning out the design, the layout of that studio, I started with the control room and a machine room, and the dimensions of those rooms were specifically created to house a 56-ish channel SSL 4K. That was the whole point. The entire layout of the studio was with the hope and the dream that one day I could put an SSL in there. There were some other design principles in the studio too, like the live room and the booths had no parallel walls whatsoever. But really, the foundation of that studio was around how much space do I need? What do I need to actually have to put an SSL in here? Now, those of you that have watched the channel for a long time, you know that story. Me and a whole bunch of other people that were in that building, painters and photographers and sculptors, it was a whole creative community. We all got kicked out so the building could be redeveloped into condos, and that happened before I could get my SSL. Losing that studio is what prompted my move from Illinois to Nashville. And again, like many of you know that have been watching the channel for a long time, when I first moved here, I ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment, and the second bedroom was my studio. And you're not putting an SSL in an apartment bedroom. January 2019, we signed the papers to build this house. We chose the layout and design of this house to be a functional studio. The studio was actually the top priority. And in August of 2019, we closed on this house and I moved in here. Now, most of you, probably your first exposure to me was the build video of this room when I originally built this studio. That video came out October 2019. In February 2020, SSL released the Origin console. My career was going good. This YouTube channel was taking off pretty quickly. I now had the space for a console, and this console just made sense. You could plug it into a wall outlet, a 20 amp circuit would run the whole console. The layout of it, the concept of it, the sound of it, everything just made sense and was lining up. And I'm like, do I need to buy this console? So I went to a private showing and I spent 2 or 3 hours mixing on this console, really digging into the sound quality, to the functionality, to the workflow. I specifically went there to see what it would take to fit that console into my workflow. I think they released that console. It was $50,000 when it was released. It's not a small amount of money, but a handful of places were running 0% interest for 5 years on an SSL Origin console. And now we're talking about something. Now we're talking about a way that this is doable. I left that mixing session just super pumped. It was the perfect console. It fits my workflow, it fits my concept, it fits what I wanted. Didn't have dynamics on every channel. That was really the only downfall, but I could make that work. So I came home and I began planning the rest of the studio around a console, around that console, the SSL Origin. I had to plan new interfaces because I needed more channels of I/O, patch bays and cabling, and just exactly what all. I began making a detailed list of exactly all what I needed to do in order to make this work. I spent about a week really planning this stuff out and figuring out how I wanted to do it. At the end of that week, I started hearing about this thing called COVID. Apparently it was running rampant in China. And I'm like, that's odd, but I didn't think that much of it. And about a week later, New York City shut down. And I was like, uh-oh. And a week after that, the entire country was shut down. I didn't have any idea what was going to happen. I thought I was about ready to starve to death because no one was going to spend money on making music when the whole world just got shut down. I feel very, very, very fortunate to say that 2020 was the busiest year of my career. I worked on over 200 songs in 2020. It was by far the busiest year of my career. So I decided to put the purchase of an SSL on hold because I didn't know what would happen. I thought eventually all these clients coming off the road that I had, eventually if they don't get to go back out on the road for a very long time, they're going to run out of money. They're going to stop paying me to produce and mix their songs. And so I just started saying yes to every single thing that got offered to me. Everything, absolutely everything. I was working 16, 18 hours a day, stockpiling and stashing money because I was 100% convinced that one day I was going to wake up and this was all going to be over. And I needed to create as much cushion as I could possibly pull off, so that way when that day came, I could still pay my bills, feed my family. So I didn't buy the SSL because I thought for sure the whole thing was going to fall apart eventually. And then it turned into the busiest year of my career, and I didn't buy the SSL because I didn't want to shut the studio down for a week or 2 or 3 weeks to install a console. We got music to make, and there's a line around the block to get in the studio, so let's just keep cranking. By like November or December 2020, I was like, I gotta slow down. I can't keep this up. It's probably what led to my health issues, if I'm being honest. So I started putting the brakes on it all a little bit and giving myself some breathing room. But every few months, I was like, that console would be pretty cool. I wonder what it looks like if I put that console in here. Now, in the process of trying to get that big console SSL sound that I always loved, I really started digging in to hand-picking the right pieces of gear to get as close to that giant console sound as I could. It's one of the reasons that led me down the path of having this much hardware, and it's most certainly one of the reasons that led me down this path of having my own signature preamps that I put on my mix bus. By the way, we're doing another run of signature preamps, and we're doing 2 other signature units. The top link in the description down below is to sign up to an email list. I'll never spam you, but it's where you're gonna get early notification of when new signature models go live. I'll send a message there before anyone else knows about it, so you can know when they're coming. Now, obviously at this point, the setup is pretty refined. The gear is pretty refined. It's very specifically handpicked to do very specific things. But I'd be lying if I said that I had completely abandoned the idea of ever having a console. And more specifically, an SSL. But there are some big pros and some big cons to owning a console. But rather than me sit here and tell you what the pros and cons are without having a console behind me, I want to bring on a good friend of mine. So I called my buddy Joe Wanasek, who has an SSL Origin. He has worked on a ton of huge records. And I was like, Joel, can you film a video clip for me just explaining to people the pros and cons of owning the exact console that I almost bought? And he agreed. So thank you very much, Joel, for agreeing to be a part of this. Now, before I kick it over to Joel to go over all of this stuff, because you're going to want to stick around for this, there are links in the description down below for the SSL Origin. Go check it out. See the pricing. See the specs. In addition to that, there's links down below for every single piece of gear that I own. And just about all of those links go to Sweetwater. So if you want to see what I'm using on a daily basis on every record, hit the links down in the description down below. But you don't just have to check that stuff out. Anytime you guys need any piece of musical gear whatsoever, whether it's a pack of guitar strings, a mic cable, your Holy Grail compressor, or an SSL Origin, you can click on any link in the description of any one of my videos. And once you're on Sweetwater's site, you can purchase absolutely anything you need. Costs you nothing extra, but it goes a long ways to help me keep making videos like this. Educational, interesting, entertaining content. It really goes a long ways to help me try to keep helping people make better music. So thank you so much to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video, and a massive thanks to you guys for using those links down below anytime you need to purchase literally anything. Let's hear what Joel has to say about owning the exact console that I almost bought.
I've had my SSL Origin console for about 3 years now. I've mixed on average over 200 songs a year professionally with it. I've done artists like Skillet, Voila, Fuel, Catch Your Breath, and so many more. I think out of all of the gear that I've ever invested in terms of like the ROI on the Sonics, meaning like what it did for my actual work quality, the board, meaning the Origin, is the highest ROI, return on investment, that I've ever gotten. Meaning like I've owned all sorts of outboard and compressors and things like that. And like the console like immediately made a massive sonic difference where I was like, yes, this is great. I'm so glad I did this. So what are the pros and cons of owning a console? Let's start out with the cons. I think the first thing that people are going to say is, yeah, it's expensive. You're right. It is a serious investment for serious people. And I think that, you know, if you're a working professional, this is definitely something you probably want to take a good look at. If you're a hobbyist or, you know, maybe aspiring, you don't have a lot of clients, you probably don't want to spend the money on it. I mean, all in all, I think When I got the financing done, it basically cost me about $800 a month. And my mix rate is higher than that. So in my brain, I was like, well, I just need to mix one song every single month, and then I can afford the console, right? So that's kind of how I justified it in my head. So for me, it wasn't like some crazy career risk to buy the thing. It's something I've always wanted. And when it made sense and I knew I had enough demand for it, I was like, okay, I'm going to take the plunge and I'm going to go for it. The next con of having a console, I think, is that it's got a large acoustic footprint. And it definitely took me a while to learn how to mix outside of the sweet spot. I spent over a decade mixing 100% in the box and another decade of my career doing hybrid. So for me, having experienced both things, it was really weird not mixing totally in the computer. And it definitely took me about a year to really get used to that. But once you do, it's not bad. And I think the third con, and probably the most important, is recalls. Because the Origin is a dumb console, meaning it doesn't have any like recallable faders or recallable EQs or anything like that. Some people might look at that and be like, well, how do you deal with that? And again, especially somebody like me who does really high volume mixing, where sometimes I will, maybe mix 2 songs in a day. And then I might spend an hour jumping across 3 or 4 different projects doing different recalls. Like, how do you manage that? Okay, well, the answer is you have to create a system. The first thing I bought that really helped me was the Wes Audio NG Leveler. I put that on all the faders and all of my small faders and large faders so I could automate everything. And I could use the UF8 in front of me here, which is a really great control surface by SSL, and it works seamlessly. So I can mix with my hands 100%. I can automate, and it's got instant recall so I can jump across sessions very, very quickly. And then I keep all of my outboard the same. So all I got to do is decide how hard I want to hit it and how much. So it's like a button in or out. Do I want to hit the insert or not? And that's really, really simple for me to recall, because if there is something that changes from my standard settings, meaning like I like this compressor set this way on this particular channel, then I can just make something in the notepad here in Cubase when I'm mixing, and it's not bad. And the longest part is just recalling the EQs. And in my workflow, the way I figured it out is I do a lot of the same frequencies and Q widths on certain instruments because certain things just sound good. And I always park the same instruments in the same spots on the board. So a lot of times I just need to recall gains and sometimes a small frequency adjustments, and it's very, very fast. So all in all, the system that works for me, and again, I've tried multiple systems of recall over the 3 years that I've had this. So for me, the way I've got my stuff set up here on the board, it takes me about 1 to 2 minutes to do a recall. It's super fast, it's super easy, and it's almost as fast as mixing in the box. Now let's talk about the pros of owning a console. The first thing is obviously the sonics. As a mixer, my job is sonics, and there's something about in the box mixing that just never, like there was a certain barrier I couldn't get past. There's a movement that old records have, especially in the low end, and a front to back in terms of like depth and width and separation, meaning the way the instruments sit together where they're separated and clear, but they're gelled, meaning they sound like the mix is cohesive. There's a way that the board just naturally does that takes so much energy in the box to get, and it just automatically does it. It's just the sound of the board. So you can't get the sound of a console in the computer. I've tried everything. I have spent months and months and months, years of my life even, trying to figure out how to get my board, or the sound of a board in the box, and I have not been successful. The computer has its own sound, which is great. A lot of people do great work in it, but it's not the sound that I want. So for me, the sound that I want, the sound in my head, is the sound that the board gives me. So for me, like the sonics are the highest priority. As a mixer, that's what I care about the most, and my clients care about the most. I want to try to make timeless records, and I want records that sound the absolute best that they can. So for me, I'd rather own a tool like this and know that it's the sound that I want, and this is the only way to achieve it and work with it, than I would not have it. So to me, that's like the trade-off. You know what I mean? It costs a lot of money and there's some cons, but for me, the sonics above all else are the most important thing. And I love how the SSL sounds. I get so excited to come into work every day and mix on it. All right, the next pro is it's faster to mix on a console. And I think it's important to realize that like mixing with a mouse is difficult because you can really only click on one parameter at a time or one fader, whereas I can take my hands on the board and I can just start moving things. Like, for example, multi-mic guitars. You might have like 6 different mics on a guitar and you can just balance it in and out with your fingers in seconds, where I'd have to sit there and like click, drag, click, mute, solo. It's so slow compared to mixing on the board. And the thing that I really love about it, though, is just like when you are mixing with your hands, mixing is a very emotional thing. Yeah, it can be technical, but really, like in order to feel a pocket in a groove. Working with your hands is so much faster and easier than it is with a mouse. And there's a bit of a learning curve if you're not used to it, but it definitely allows you to kind of just like feel certain pockets and like balance things and adjust things against each other very, very quickly. So mixing with your hands and just being able to like reach out and grab an EQ really quickly is so much faster than like go to a menu, scroll down, find the plugin you load, type it in, figure out the exact parameter. You can just literally grab, turn, and it's like there. So it's a faster experience. It's more musical because you're working with your gut instinct and you're not sitting there overanalyzing everything on a chart. And you're not just looking at a screen burning out your eyes. You're actually part of the song and moving it with your hands. So that is one of my favorite pros for sure. The last pro I will put out there is that having a console has gotten me a ton of work. And what I mean by that is so many people see it online and they're like, this looks awesome. I want to hear what this sounds like. It has a certain clout. The person that has the tool is very, very serious about what they do. So it brings in a lot of work and a lot of people are really excited to run audio through it and hear the difference and hear what it sounds like versus, in the box and things like that. So yes, having the board has gotten me a ton of work and that's something I was very happy about because it took me about 1.5 years to really pay the thing off. And now it's mine and I get to work with it every day. So to sum it up, was it worth it? Yes. I think that I look at equipment as I'm borrowing the bank's money at very low interest rates. And I work on the equipment and I pay it off with work over time. And it helps me get more work because it helps me up my game as a professional. And then in the many times that I've sold different pieces of gear, like I've never really lost money on it. Usually I break even and wash. I mean, I had a particular experience once where I had sold all my gear and I went 100% in the box with just an interface. And the 10 years of equipment that I had bought where I liquidated, I think I lost like $2,000 or $3,000 on it. But I look at it like, okay, so I use this equipment to make a living for like 10 years and I only lost $2,000. And if I divide 2,000 by 10 years, that means my monthly payment is literally, a very, very small amount to use all the equipment that I've always wanted to use. So I never really lost money essentially on it. And I was able to use the tools that I bought to make money. So overall, yes, I don't think the console is going to hold its value as good as some of the other pieces of equipment, but like I said, I've already paid it off and it's already paying massive returns in terms of the clients that I'm working with and where I am in my career. So for me, I think it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. And if you're somebody who's interested in buying a console, I would highly recommend that you take a serious look at it because there's some great options out there. You can get like a used XL desk. I bought my Origin used in near mint condition and I got a great deal on it. And like I said, I couldn't be happier.
Now, Joel is a part of a ton of different stuff. Nail the Mix. He has his own YouTube channel. He's just done a ton of cool stuff. So I'm going to link a bunch of his info down below, including his dedicated 1-year review video of his SSL Origin. I'll link it down below. Go check out all of his stuff and see what all he's up to because killer dude, incredibly talented, and just like me, just an absolute workaholic and kind of a gear junkie. So I don't know that I want to even add any more to that. I would rather his experiences just be on their own. So, is a console coming one day? I don't know. There's something about looking at a console in the room that is so incredibly inspiring. Makes you feel like you are in a real studio. Not that this isn't a real studio, but when there's a big console, man, it's inspiring to sit in front of. When clients walk in, they're like, oh, this is for real. That's a big mixing board. There's definitely some cons, but the thing that is important if you are looking for a console is, do the pros outweigh the cons? And if they do, go for it. So maybe one day, we'll see what happens. Maybe one day there will still be an SSL in this room. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.